are in our last unit under business regulations, Environment Act and Cyber Law. So this is the last unit where we have two different acts that we'll be studying. Cyber Law is otherwise called as Information Technology Act. Okay, IT Act it's otherwise commonly called as. So it has two parts to the chapter. So today we'll be starting with the first act called as the Environment Protection Act in the year 1986. Let's look at the contents of this act. You're going to study about the background, how it came into picture, why was the act and when was the act introduced, what are the objectives of the act, definition of important terms, and also types of pollution and what are the powers under the central government in order to protect the environment that surrounds us. Okay, so these are the contents that we'll be covering under this particular act. So let's look at the background. During the past decades, the economic and industrial growth of the country has been extremely high, right? We all agreed to that point. As and then we have started industrialization or focusing each 5-year plans into agriculture, industrialization, etc. We have also seen that we have overlooked into how much of damage that we are happy that industries are growing. We have more factories setting up in our own countries. Instead of importing goods, we have set up industries and factories and chemical industries in our own nation or economy, but we have paid less importance as to how much it is affecting our environment around us. So that increasingly serious environmental degradation events which has occurred in the last century have paved way to taking effective steps in environmental protection. Now, as much as it is important for us to develop economy to develop and a standard of living to develop, it is equally we as human beings are responsible to protect the environment we are living in. It can be land, air, soil or water, whatever nature that we have been gifted with. We need to protect them, we need to make use of them, or we need to get benefited by them, but we have no right to destroy the environment that we are living in. Yes or no? Now if you can observe very recently, like when the pandemic started and everybody had to follow the lockdown instructions, have you seen so many news in and across India or across the globe, how environment was healing itself? Have you read those newses? Right now, how environment or how the water bodies were more cleaner, and how the environment was able to see more of birds moving around, or we could see so many changes. And that's when we realized how much we have been harming or how much we have been negatively impacting the environment. So it is very important to draw a balance between the environment as well as the economic development. Because we need to economically develop, we do not have to suppress the environment or destroy, or what we'll say environment degradation. We need to give equal importance in preserving our environment. So that's about the background. Let's look at the introduction of the act. So it all started with the Bhopal gas tragedy in the year 1984. Then the government of India enacted the Environment Protection Act of the year 1986 under the article of 253 of the Constitution. Now we have all known, I'm sure you've all at least read, or if you have not come across this tragedy, what is it? Please go back after the class and Google and definitely read about the Bhopal gas tragedy. It was one of the India's major industrial disaster. Why do we call that as a major disaster? Because it was impacting, or it has killed more than 15,000 people and has affected over 6 lakh workers, right? So it happened around December 2nd, more precisely, in the year 1984, where in Bhopal there's a factory or chemical factory where the gases were leaked out, and the entire destruction just happened quietly because it is just a chemical gas, right? It's not like an explosion or something. You can go read about it in detail. So then that's when the government of India or our authorities took it very seriously, how not taking enough care or being negligent could cause not only environment damage but also loss of many lives, right? So that tragedy marked or embarked a new change and initiated the governments or to take up a serious responsibility in preserving the environment. Now this tragedy is also termed as or known as the world's worst industrial disaster. Now you can see how much it has impacted the people or the surroundings, or that point of time you could impact. We not have much medical facility back then in 1984, correct? Today we have all the equipments, we have all the safety measures, but back then it was really tough, right? So that was the tragedy or an event that has led to what we today are studying, Environment Protection Act. So the what is the purpose of this act? It is to implement the decisions of the United Nations Conference, where our economy or Indian participated on the human environment. So there was a conference held by the United Nations, where even our country participated and discussed and had to take up various steps in order to how we can preserve our environment, how can we take necessary steps in preserving it, right? So that's when the act came into force. That was when Rajiv Gandhi was the then Prime Minister of India in the year 1986. So that's about the background and how the act was introduced. Moving on to the scope of the act. This act, that is the Environment Act of 1986, it extends to whole of India, which means it also includes Jammu and Kashmir, right? We have studied various acts which does not apply to Jammu and Kashmir, but this one act is applying to entire whole of India. So, what does it include when I'm talking about environment? It includes water, air, land, and its relationship with human beings and other living creatures or plants. So, how we take care of air, water, land, how we are going to make use of them, and what is our relationship as to what extent are we getting benefited, and how is that we need to preserve them and to make sure not just human beings survive on this planet but also the plants, trees, and also the other living creatures. It can be animals, or it can be the water bodies, aquatic animals, etc. Environment pollution is the presence of any pollutants defined as solid, liquid, or gases present in the atmosphere. Now, how can I define environment as getting polluted? Means the existence of these pollutants. What are these pollutants? It can be defined in the form of any solid material, right? Or it can be any liquid. That means in the form of water in the liquid form that you're able to impact or affect the environment, or any kind of gas, as I just told, right? The chemical factory, when or any factories now that they release all the gases or the wastage, or the how do each factory or how do each industry manage their wastage, very important. Right from starting, you can start with plastic, right? How is it being now, because it is increasingly damaging, we started with the recycling of plastic. But then once we had a substitute of using plastic, it is easy to use, and we started using it in abundance, that we did not realize that plastic is what, non-degradable, right? Or it is not really easily perishable when we dispose it off in the soil, right? So these are the things which can cause pollution to the environment. Objectives of the act: first is to coordinate the activities of various regulatory agencies. Now, even though the act has been set up as Environment Protection Act, there are various parts of regulatory bodies that is set up, to Pollution Control Board, for example, right? That's another authority which issues license or which grants license to industries. If you need to set up an industry in a particular location, what are the necessary precautions are you taking to dispose the wastage, or to dispose the gases, or to dispose any solid waste? Correct. Now what is the steps taken? Now such regulatory bodies, uh, this act has to coordinate with the work or initiatives that they are taking up to handle hazardous substance. As I told, how are you managing the wastage? It can be household wastage, it can be industrial wastage or medical, etc. How are you able to manage the wastage substance? How are you dumping it, or you burning it, etc.? What are the steps taken to handle especially the hazardous substances? The best example is plastic. Third, speedy response in the event of accidents which threatens environment. That means any accidents that there are factories that have been set up without without any kind of emergency requirement, or how do you have you taken enough precautions, if there's any emergency, or there's any leakage of gas, or there's a fire accident, how are you able to protect your building, or how are you able to protect your workers, right? Such accidents, how to respond, or how to protect environment such from such accidents, what are the precautions taken? Fourth, to punish those who endanger human environment and safety. Now, here we are talking about what about those people, or those factories or companies who are causing rigorous harm, or continuous just letting out all the industrial wastage into the water bodies. Now we always commonly heard about the Bellandur lakes, or many water bodies which have been filled with lot of foam, right, that has been released directly from the industrial bodies of factories. Now what are the action taken upon these factories, or even it can be individuals or people? What action is supposed to be taken is decided by this act. Last one, to create authorities with adequate powers for environmental pollution. Now, it can be BBMP, or it can be Pollution Control Board, or it can be any NGO, etc., who is working for the betterment of environment, or preserving of environment. So, this act has the license, or has the authority to set up various boards in order to monitor how we are preserving, what are the steps we are taking in preserving the environment, or if there is any caused harm, what is the action taken upon by such people or companies. So these are the 5 different objectives of the Environment Protection Act. Next we have the definitions under the act. Environment is defined under the act section 2 subsection A. Environment includes water, air, land, and their interrelationship which exists among between water, air, and land. So individually I'm talking about air, that is the atmosphere, the water, and the land, and also the interrelationship, how these 3 different air, water, land are being connected with. Number 2 definition, environment pollutant. According to section 2 subsection B, it means any solid, liquid, or gas substance present in connection which tend to be injurious to environment. As I told, it can be plastic, it can be some medical solid waste from the hospitals, or from the factories, or even from the household itself. Anything that is you're letting out into the environment without proper disposal. Yes or no? Without proper disposal, if you're just dumping it somewhere, or just letting out into the environment, etc., all such substances which cause harm are called as environmental pollutant. Number 3, environment pollution. So it means the presence of environmental pollutants in the environment. So if the pollutants are very much present in our surrounding, in the environment, that means it is getting polluted. Okay, polluted. So that means environment pollution. Number 4, hazardous substance. Any substance which by reason of its chemical properties cause harm to human beings, other living creatures, plants, organisms, or environment. So, as I told, hazardous means what? Dangerous or causing harm or causing death to people or death of living organisms or animals or creatures. It can be like a flu which has caused, or any kind of viruses that have been spread because of human activity, etc. Those substances are called as hazardous substances. The last definition, occupier, in relation to any factory or premises, means a person who has control over the affairs of the factory, and includes in the relation of any substance the person in possession of the substance. Now occupier means the person who is in control of the affairs of a factory. Now if a person A has a factory, now he is called as an occupier. You are occupying a particular campus or a building or a factory, and so you are responsible to make sure you are not causing any kind of harm to the environment. Okay, you have to take all the necessary precautions in order to preserve the environment, and also take care of people living or workers living or working for your company. Is that clear? So that is termed as what? Occupier. Hope you have understood. So today we have discussed a lot of aspects about environment. We started with the background of the act. We discussed why was this act introduced and what was the reason. We discussed it was Bhopal gas tragedy which led to the introduction of this act. We also discussed the scope of the act, the objectives, 5 different objectives of the act, and 5 different definitions: environment, environment pollutant, environment pollution, hazardous substance, and occupier.